Vincent, this is actually such an important thing to do. There are so many people that are going to watch this
Mhm.
that I think will then carry the information that you provide outward for the betterment. There's
Good.
so much misunderstanding right now
Yes.
around this subject. Thank you for being here.
Oh, that's the other thing that's been amazing in the course of this pandemic. So much misinformation. People just don't know where to get good information. They hear it in the wrong places, mostly mainstream media, right? We get.
Well, and
And
I'm
so,
I'm sure I will just share to tee things up. We shouldn't go into this maybe yet, but I just came from somewhere, and a gentleman there was asking me basically what I thought about the vaccine, and saying that some of his friends had told him that they weren't going to get it because they didn't want to have microchips injected into their butts.
there's no microchips involved, folks. Come on. Get your virology from a virologist.
That's why we're
Don't listen
here.
to your friend. I'm available. You can hear me anytime. And me and my colleagues, we're all virologists, and we'll tell you the truth.
He doesn't
I
work
don't
for
pull
Bill
any-
Gates either. He's just
Yeah,
I don't
that's
work
right.
for anybody, actually. I work for Columbia University. I don't take money from any pharmaceutical company. I have no skin in the game. Okay. I just want you to be healthy and I want you to be educated. That's my goal in life.
I'm already pumped. That was awesome. Let's go. Yeah, what I'm talking about. I think that's actually a really good place to start. Like that, because I don't think we've ever talked about that. That you're basically unaffiliated. You do your research through the university. You don't take.
Yeah.
I think a lot of
Yeah.
people imagine virologists take like these giant corporate payment
Yeah.
packages or things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. People assume that I'm a shill for big pharma. Hey, folks, I wish I was because I'm poor. And, well, not poor, but I don't get money from any pharmaceutical company. And I do this. I'm a university professor. I love teaching. I do research. We get our lab funded by the National Institutes of Health, and that all goes to the lab. So I am telling you things to keep you safe and to keep you educated. No other reason. I'm not, we have to do disclosure statements when we give talks. And my disclosure slide, I have nothing to disclose. My podcast, I don't make any money on. We just survive on donations to pay for the expenses. So I'm doing this because I love truth. I love science. Okay.
Yeah, I think that comes through very clear when I look at your content that you do on YouTube. I watched your entire Twiz podcast with the other three virologists on the vaccines, and I thought it was fascinating. It really helped me, and I've recommended it several times to my community, just to get as a basis to just get informed on
Right.
what this is. I think one of the number one misunderstandings is short term and long term effects of vaccines, and I also think that entwined in that is like a lack of understanding of just like how much this has been tested.
So start with a statement of basic fact. There are now 2 vaccines for COVID-19. One of them has been out a few days. The other one, I think, from Moderna was approved yesterday or today. So Vincent,
So,
maybe you can clarify.
so tomorrow, December 17th, the FDA will have a hearing, just like it had last week for the Pfizer vaccine. Remember, it's all day, it's televised, you can watch it, streamed, I should say. And tomorrow they'll do the same for Moderna. It's anticipated that on Friday the FDA will issue an emergency use authorization. That's not the same as approving the vaccine. Okay, it means that in EUA, you can only use it in certain situations and you can't sell it to hospitals and anyone else who wants it yet. That will happen next year. So
Okay.
by Monday, we will have 2 vaccines with EUAs in the US. And already the Pfizer vaccine, which was rolled out last week, approved last week, many, many doses have been shipped to various states. And as you've seen, probably people are getting the first immunizations. Healthcare workers are the first ones to get it, right? Because they're constantly in the face of the virus, and that makes perfect sense. And then we have millions of doses available this year, maybe up to 50 million from those 2 companies. And then, but that's obviously not enough to
No.
immunize the U.S. We need 2 doses of each of those vaccines. So we're going to need more. They can make more next year, but we still need more. And other vaccines are in the pipeline. We anticipate having maybe 6 vaccines in the U.S. Licensed or given EUAs next year. And maybe by the end of the year, everybody in the U.S. can be vaccinated. That's the plan. But
So
they're all
you
slightly different.
believe, this is an important question, You
Mhm.
believe that to get everyone in the United States vaccinated, and by the way, for those of you who didn't see our previous shows with Vincent last spring, his predictions on both the vaccine timeline and a fall spike, which he made last April and May, that those things would happen, have been pretty accurate.
100%.
You believe it'll be about a year before we would have enough vaccine to get to every person in the US.
I think so, yeah. And these companies have to ramp up production. That's not easy. The technology in making these two vaccines in particular, the Pfizer and the Moderna, they are mRNA vaccines, brand new technology, never been made before in any sizable number of doses. So they've already made, 100 million doses, and they have to make hundreds of millions more. And actually, they want to make billions of doses because they want to serve the rest of the world or
Yeah.
parts of the rest of the world as well, right? Which is important. So this is a remarkable thing that's happening here. I have to say, at the beginning of this, we didn't know if any of these would work. We had
And
no idea.
you touched on something interesting. It's a little bit wonky policy or science piece, but this type of vaccine, both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, are using an approach that has never been used in a major vaccine before. Is that right?
That's right. mRNA vaccines have never been used in human vaccines before. They have been had very limited testing before in humans. But in January, Pfizer and Moderna said, we're going to make an mRNA vaccine against this virus. And they started working on it in January. And then, a few months later, they started putting them in people. They've gone through 3 phases of the clinical trials, right? Phase 1, 2, and 3. All phases involve safety. And the second and third, all 3 phases involving how the vaccine makes an immune response. And the last phase, of course, how well they protect you against disease. And
Right.
it's just, to me, I am actually stunned at how this has gone well. You couldn't have planned it better. Those 2 vaccines really went well. And, there have been some trouble with some of the other vaccines, mistakes made and so forth. We can talk about those. So it's not easy to get things perfectly well.
So
And so this is amazing.
my understanding of the vaccine is that it creates the spike protein that attaches to cells, elicits an immune
That's right.
response without actually injecting any of the dead virus into the cell.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me show you a picture. Can I do that?
Yeah. Wow. That's
Sure.
amazing. Look how prepared he is. That's
I'm
Yeah.
a
so
teacher.
cool.
I'm a teacher.
Yeah,
I want you guys to get this.
Oh my God. Okay.
So that's the virus, right? That is an EM there on the left and the diagram on the right. So you can see the spike, that big spike protein. That's the way the virus attaches to cells. And most of the vaccines are making some kind of spike, either the protein or the mRNA, as you said. And so for the two vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, they're making an mRNA which codes for the spike, and that allows the cell will actually make spike for you. I have some other pictures I can show you that really illustrate this very nicely. Let's see. I do a lot of teaching online, so I have these things always queued up because it's something you can always do. This is what the spike looks like. So here again, we have this on the left of this slide, the virus is attaching to cells, and you see that's a cell there with the receptor on the surface, and that spike is doing that. On the right is the actual structure of the spike, which it's 3-dimensional structure. This is what it looks like. That's what the protein looks like. And so the vaccine takes an mRNA encoding the spike. So on the left there's how you make the mRNA. You take a DNA copy of this spike mRNA, you put it in a test tube along with an enzyme called T7 RNA polymerase, and the enzyme will make tons and tons of copies of the mRNA for spike. And this is a kind of technology that we always use in my lab. We do it all the time. We make small amounts of mRNA. We make like millionths of a gram, and they have to make kilograms of mRNA to immunize, hundreds of millions of people.
You said 50, right? Approximately 50 kilograms of.
Yeah, because everybody gets 200 micrograms,
Right.
A millionth of a gram. And then they wrap this up in a lipid coat, which is shown on the right. It's called a lipid nanoparticle, and that is injected into you. So it's a piece of RNA. There's more than one RNA in that lipid coat, and the lipid coat protects it because RNA is pretty fragile. It would break up, and that's injected into your muscle. And I think here is what happens when it's put in your muscle. So there on the left, it's injected in your muscle, in your shoulder muscle. And what happens is those mRNAs, those lipid nanoparticles go to the lymph nodes in your armpit, right? And those are the closest lymph nodes to the shoulder. And the lymph nodes are where immune reactions start. And that RNA is taken up into immune cells that are called antigen-presenting cells. The protein is made, and then those drive antibody and T-cell responses in the muscle. And these mRNA vaccines have been shown to be really good at doing that. They do a great job in making antibodies and T-cells. And as we have seen, they also protect. They have over 90% efficacy in protecting against disease. All right. Now that is a really important thing, which we have to get into here, but we'll get into it a bit later. But these two vaccines, mRNA vaccines, again, brand new technology, just developed in the last few years, a big risk. We didn't know if they would work. They work like gangbusters, over 90% protection. And these, if we could get this to everyone, these would knock down this pandemic. Of course, we have other vaccines too, so that's really good. So that's how they work. And they've been tested for safety and efficacy, which means preventing disease, as I said. And there's nothing like this. There's nothing like this. Is a new paradigm, I think. I think we're going to be using this for a lot of other viruses and even diseases. When you need to deliver a protein to a person, you could do this.
Do you believe that this has changed this has changed virology forever? The discovery and the stable use of this in humans in such a rapid period of time has accelerated virology on other fields. We may be able to cure other viruses that we haven't been able to before.
So Moderna already has HIV and herpes virus vaccines, mRNA vaccines in their pipeline.
Are you serious?
This is what we have to try for almost everything. I mean, now, it's not going to work for everything, but it is. Look how quickly they could ramp it up.
Yeah.
Because all you need is the gene sequence from the virus, right? Which we got in January. And this guy who was reading a story about it, a guy sat down at his computer on a Saturday and cranked out the mRNA, said, here, let's make this.
So basically the rest of the year has been safety testing that. That's what it comes down to, safety, and it's been proving it.
Right. So first they took 60 people and they healthy people, stick it in their arm, see if there's any issues, right? And then they do this phase 2 is, does it make antibodies and an immune response? They do that with more people and they continue to do safety. And then phase 3 is the final one where they give it to tens of thousands of people. Each company has done 30, 40,000 people, and you split them half get the vaccine, half get a placebo, right? So you can compare the two. And then they send you out in the world and they tell us when you feel sick. And when you feel sick, which means, cough, temperature, the typical signs of COVID, they have you take a nasal swab, you mail it to them, they confirm it. And then they say, are you in the control or the vaccine group? And, most of the illness was in the control group of all the cases that they've looked at so far. So both companies, and again, independently made mRNA vaccines, very similar results. So I just am very enthusiastic about this, and I'm very skeptical. If you listen to TWIV, I'm very skeptical about things, and I want really good data. I think for less than a year, this is stupendous. It's just stupendous.
One of your colleagues called it a triumph of modern medicine. Quite literally said that word for word.
I think this is true. And you know what's the cool part? I showed you that slide of how you make the mRNA. That was just done in a lab years ago by somebody who thought it would be cool to do it. He wasn't thinking about making a vaccine or any therapeutic product. He said, well, this would be fun to do because we could use mRNA. And now it turns out to be really useful. So the moral is, I like to tell this, is that you get good scientists, you give them money and you let them play, right? How many fields is that important in? Just let them play and let them follow their curiosity and good things will happen.
And is that why we didn't figure out mRNA before? Is that we just didn't have funding / interest in it? And now we have the entire world focusing on a problem? And
well, there have been traditional vaccines like, polio vaccines. They're viruses that we modify or inactivate. They're flu vaccines, the same thing. And then maybe 20 years ago, people said, hey, we could make DNA vaccines, right? Where you take this DNA encoding the spike, say, and just inject it into people. So they tried that for a long time. And there's even a West Nile vaccine for horses. That's a DNA vaccine. They just inject DNA into your muscle. But when they tried that in people, it never worked really well. It didn't give good immune responses. And so people kind of have forgotten about DNA vaccines. And then 5 years ago, someone said, what about mRNA? So the problem with RNA is if you just stick RNA into your muscle, it's going to go away in minutes. It's very sensitive. The key was wrapping it up in lipids, right? Making a lipid nanoparticle in that. And so these companies have played around with formulations for a couple of years, and that protects it. And that's the key. Cells like to take up those particles, and then the mRNA gets in them, and boom, you get protein.
That's so cool. Wow.
It's the thing. Let people play, right? Let them investigate. That's what scientists do.
This really has the potential to actually so many problems in the world are a result of viruses, rogue viruses. I mean, I'm thinking already. You just discussed HIV. There's 8 different strains of herpes that affect over 80% of the human population. I mean, these are enormous implications. What you're saying right now, this could change the world forever.
I think that this is a very quick way to check out if you could make a vaccine for those viruses. It's much easier to make than many other types of vaccines that we are making. I mean, many people are doing that for SARS-CoV-2. They're trying all the other different kinds of vaccines, right? But I think this is just so easy to do.
This is amazing that no one, Devin, you've hit on something huge. No one has talked about.
No one's talked
I haven't heard until I heard from Vincent.
Yeah, same.
The applicability of this technology, which is now being proven out at mass scale, mass safety across many countries, many companies, could be used for all these other human diseases. If that's true, this could be a space age event where you're releasing a new set of technology like ARPANET or DARPANET creating the internet. COVID creates the vaccine wave of the future for diseases right now we consider untreatable.
Yeah, that's a good point because, if not for the pandemic, maybe we wouldn't have tried this for many years, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? But this has pushed us. This pushed us to do it really right away and quickly. And I think that's the defining moment. And now, yes, it's possible going forward. We'll have many more vaccines based on this. And it all started, in 2020 with the COVID pandemic.
So taking a quick step back to hit the basics first, without too much detail, what is mRNA? So many people at least have heard of RNA and DNA. RNA is the messenger in cells. But can you give a layman's view of what mRNA, this type of vaccine, means? What's the M?
So in our cells, as everybody knows, our genes are made of DNA, right? So they code for us.
It's Twitch. Not everyone knows that.
Right? Everybody knows that.
Well, they can all know it. They can go to 23andMe. We are not sponsored, but maybe we should have been.
I appreciate your confidence in our audience. It's good.
But DNA is in the nucleus of the cell, and it's in the cytoplasm that proteins are made, right? So the DNA never leaves the nucleus. It stays in there. So how do you make proteins in the cytoplasm? Well, it's the messenger, right? That's why it's called messenger RNA, because mRNA is made in the nucleus by copying DNA, and then it goes out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm of the cell, and then it is made into protein. It's copied by what we call ribosomes, these little factories that make protein, and that's why it's called mRNA, messenger RNA, because when it was first discovered, they said, this is the messenger between the DNA and the cytoplasm of
Got
the
it.
cell.
So the M is messenger. Okay.
M is messenger, yes. And so, when they talk about mRNA vaccines, it makes me very happy because people are forced to say something scientific, right? mRNA, I like that very much. And so we learned years ago how to make mRNA in a test tube. As I said, I showed you that picture of how you can make it from a DNA using a purified enzyme. And guess what? That enzyme that I told you that's used to make mRNA. So that's what Pfizer, that's what Moderna are using. They have this enzyme that they can make in huge quantities. That's from another virus. It's from a bacteriophage, like that bacteriophage sitting on my shelf there, that space ship looking thing. They purified the enzyme from that virus to make these mRNAs because you can do it cheaply and in huge quantities that you need.
Are
It's
there
amazing.
are there any meaningful differences between the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine? Does it matter which one you get?
It's a good question. People are going
Yes,
to want to know.
Yeah.
it's a good question. So they're almost the same. The mRNA is exactly the same, and it codes for the same protein. The only difference is the lipid coat around the two. Pfizer's and Moderna's are different. And, this is a proprietary thing, so we don't know exactly. But what it means, in terms of efficacy of the vaccine, they're both in the 90th percentile. So if you said to me, would you take either one? I'd say, sure. Either one, as far as I can tell, is fine. The only difference is the storage conditions. The Pfizer vaccine has to be maintained very cold temperatures, minus 70 degrees Celsius. Now, I do Celsius, folks. I don't do Fahrenheit.
Oh,
So you
God.
you just type it in your thing there, and you can figure it out.
Guys, what is that in freedom units, please?
It's almost minus 100.
Jesus.
Yeah. Almost
Yeah,
minus
it's cold.
It's really cold. So your freezer doesn't go down that far. Okay, your freezer does zero,
No.
right? 0 Fahrenheit, zero Celsius, which is what 32 Fahrenheit, right? So that's a problem because how do you ship it? So Pfizer has developed these boxes that you fill with dry ice. So dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. It comes in these pellets you can buy, and they stay really cold until they sublimate, right? They go from the frozen state to a gas. And so they ship this vaccine, and then wherever it gets, it has to be kept cold. There are freezers that do minus 70 Celsius. We have some in my lab, but most doctors' offices don't have these freezers. So you're going to have to keep it frozen until you use it. And, it's not easy to get dry ice everywhere, right? I'm sure there's some parts of the world where it's hard to get. So the transport of Pfizer is a little dicey, although I have a suspicion that, the first 100 million doses are going to be used as soon as they arrive at their destination. So
why does this need to be kept so cold? What like it must decay instantly and any kind of heat?
Destabilizes.
Those lipid nanoparticles just decay at higher temperatures. And
but you're going to inject them into a person who's 98.6 or whatever. So they're going to go from minus 100 Fahrenheit. So we'll use from minus 70 to plus 37 in Celsius. But they're going to be active long enough to protect me despite.
Yeah. So in the body, they will last about 2 days. And what the key is, as soon as they're injected, they go to your lymph nodes in your armpit, right? And the lymph nodes take them up and they get into cells, and now they're not going to degrade anymore. Actually, the cell is going to take off the lipid and just start making protein from the mRNA. So the way it works,
okay. So the lipid won't matter.
Lipid doesn't matter. The vials have 5 doses, right? So they're going to thaw them out, and I think they'll give immediately 5 shots easily, right? Because so many people want this, so it's not going to sit around very much. Now, in Moderna, on the other hand, they say it will last in a refrigerator for 2 days, in fact, and it will last at freezer temperatures, 32F, for a couple of weeks, actually. So theirs has a different storage requirement, which is nice. So that's the only difference as far as I can tell. And it makes no difference for efficacy, that is protecting you against disease. It's just that if you keep it, say, at room temperature for a day, it's probably not going to be a good idea. You have to inject it right away, both vaccines, in fact. So that's the difference. Otherwise, they're exactly the same. Yeah.
So one more sort of lead up question, and then I think people are going to want to hear a lot about safety. But just really quickly, this was me playing dumb a little bit on purpose. What exactly is a vaccine? Is it a cure? So if I have COVID and you give me this, will I become well?
No, a vaccine is a preventative. It's a therapeutic. It will prevent infections, but it will not cure. With one exception, all the vaccines have to be given ahead of when you're infected. The exception is the rabies vaccine.
Yeah.
The only vaccine where you can get it after you've been bitten and acquire the virus, you have a couple of weeks, actually. So it takes about 2 weeks to get an immune response, and it takes that long for the virus to get into your brain from wherever the dog bites you, or bat or whatever. So that's the only one. But other vaccines have to be given ahead of time before you are infected. They will not help you once you are infected.
The this vaccine requiring 2 doses, something that I actually don't know, and I think it's just so simple that it might just have escaped everybody. These are not this is 2 doses of the same vaccine. So you don't
That's
need
right.
you don't in some vaccines you need to get an injection and then get an injection of another different type of
Mhm.
well, yeah, a booster that's different. But this is a booster. That's really interesting because I have a follow-up question as to why the
Yeah. So that's right. With
yeah,
both
mhm,
mRNA vaccines, you get 2 of the same exact
same
vaccine,
exact
just
shot.
2 weeks
Which makes
apart. Yeah.
logistics a lot easier because then you don't have to say, okay, well, you're on number 2. But that's interesting. I wonder why people have such an immune response to the second one and not the first.
Well,
Yeah,
Maybe
I've
they can
read
control
that people are
titer of
getting their
drugs.
butts kicked by number 2
Yeah.
from a
well,
sort of
that's
side
because
effects.
when you first inject, the body's never seen it before. Takes some time to make the antibodies and make the cells. But once they're made, we have them forever. We have memory, right? So those cells are already the cells that make the antibodies are in your body now. There are already a lot of them that are specific for the spike protein. And so when you get the second shot, there are an immediate reaction and much more intense than the first one because
Mm.
it's a memory recall. It's a memory recall. And that in turn is making even more memory, which should last you many years. Exactly how long these last, we don't know, obviously,
All right.
because we've just started using them. But
And
some
that's
vaccines,
definitely one of the questions. You've been good at speculating. So since you brought that up, and I understand you don't know, no one knows. But lots of people want to know, and it's already come up in chat here.
Mhm.
What do we believe, and admitting it's a guess, maybe an educated guess, about the duration of protection?
All right. So we don't know, you're right, but we can make some guesses. But I always like to guess based on some data, right? So we've spent the last 9 months saying when people get infected with SARS-CoV-2, how long does their protection last? Do they make an antibody and a cellular immune response that's durable? Durable means lasts a long time, and we don't know yet because it's only been months. However, you can look at the antibodies and the immune cells that are made in people who have recovered from infection and see how they decay over time. And so we have about 8 months worth of time points now, right? You could take samples every month and calculate the decay and then say, how long would this last into the future, right? So it's like decay kinetics. And we can say, looks like after SARS-CoV-2 infection, the people that recover, looks like they have immunity that would last years,
Wow.
okay?
Mhm.
Which is good. Years. We don't know how many years, but we can say that because the kinetics look similar to viruses that we know very well, right?
Okay.
And so it looks like it's going to last years, and that's really good. So, what about the vaccine? Now, the vaccine could be better because the virus is mucking with our immune system for sure. It's encoding a lot of proteins that go in there and tinker in a way in an attempt to enable it to bypass any immune responses. So it could be that the response to a natural infection is somewhat dampened, and a vaccine will be even better because it's just spike protein and none of these other antagonists. We call them immune antagonists. It's just a spike. So it may be that it lasts even longer. We just don't know. We certainly have vaccines that last a lifetime. The polio vaccine, lifetime lasting. So it's not impossible. So I would say, I would guess that the vaccine is going to last probably a few years and maybe even longer. And I would just say also, the worst is possibly lasting only 1 year, in which case you might need to get an annual booster,
Mhm.
sort of like
Not
you do
unlike a flu shot,
flu
even though
vaccine. Exactly.
the reasons for a flu shot every year are different.
That's right.
But you're sort of saying the worst case
I think
is
so.
that
That's my prediction. And
okay.
you know, but I also think that once most of, and I said this last time I was on, I think once most of the world is immune in some way by either infection or by vaccination, I then think that we will probably not need to immunize anyone any longer. I suspect that because the serious disease occurs in people over 65, and we'll immunize all of those. And so it's really not going to be an issue anymore. And the reason I say that is because there are other human coronaviruses. There are 4 other human coronaviruses that infect everybody on the planet, and they cause very mild upper tract infection, common colds, right? Sniffles and sore throat. And we get infected with them every year, and we don't get very sick. And I think this virus will become like that eventually, and we won't even need to immunize. I think we'll need to immunize maybe for 10 years, 5 to 10 years at the most, and then it's likely we don't have to anymore. But that's a really big prediction, and I have to watch for that.
Okay, fantastic. So let's talk about safety. Big question, obviously, in layman's terms, maybe even in your terms, creation of these vaccines was rushed. And as you said, the 2 vaccines we have, one has an emergency use authorization. The other one, we expect that Friday. So they're being authorized only for critical use. Of course, since people are dying, everyone is kind of considered critical. So in a way, that constitutes de facto approval, even though that's not legally what it is. All that aside, there's lots of questions in chat. And of course, just in my mind, about safety, about how do we know? Well, I'll just let you take safety generally, and then we can talk about allergic reactions and special cases and so on.
So I totally understand that people are concerned about safety. You should be, because these are new vaccines, and no vaccine has ever been made in less than a year, right? And I was concerned at the beginning also. So I watched all of the trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And I can tell you that, in the numbers of people that have been examined, less than 100,000, there's nothing that I see that is serious that is caused by the vaccine. So what do we do? First of all, when you do these safety trials, starting with phase 1 and phase 2 and 3, in more and more and more people, you give people the vaccine and you give them a placebo, and then you watch them and you see what happens. And they report in very great detail what happened to them. And you get very common things like pain at the injection site, right? Makes sense, because you're getting an injection. A lot of people get fever, because when your immune response kicks in, you can get a fever. And that's completely normal, and it means your vaccine is working. And in fact, many people say, I must have placebo because I don't feel bad at all, right? It kind of gives it away sometimes, although some people actually never get side effects with any vaccine. I had a flu shot a month ago, and my arm was sore for 2 days, right? Because my immune cells are coming in and grabbing the vaccine and checking it out. And so when cells come into an area in great numbers, it causes pain because it's making swelling happen, right? So it's completely normal. So that's one of the highest side effects, pain at the injection site, fever. You can also have headache, and because when the immune response kicks in, it's making soluble proteins that can go throughout your whole body, including your brain. It's not just at the injection site. So you can have fever, you can have headaches, you can have fatigue. Many people say I'm tired for a day or two after the flu vaccine.
The most common thing I saw reported in some news I read this morning was chills. I could pull up the article maybe, but
you can get chills, because when you have a fever, you feel chilled, right?
Yeah, I assume that's just like the other side of a fever, right? My temperature is high, and so I feel cold because my body's trying to maintain a high temperature.
You can have loss of appetite. Some people get gastrointestinal distress. Important thing to do, which many people don't do, right? They just listen to the reports and say, oh my gosh, these things happen. You have to look at the actual data from the company and see what happened in the vaccine arm and what happened in the placebo arm. And you can get all the data for all 30,000 individuals if you'd like. And you go down the list and you see fatigue. I'd say 70% of the people who got the vaccine reported fatigue. But you know what? 30% of the people in the placebo arm also reported fatigue.
Interesting.
Because people are tired, right?
Yeah, sure. That's fascinating. Huh.
And in the Pfizer study, 5 people died. Well, you know what? They were evenly distributed between the vaccine and the placebo arm, because when you immunize 30,000 people, some of them will die.
Over a year.
Yeah.
What did they die of? Well, in the Pfizer vaccine, which was, just a few months, one died of a car accident. obviously not caused by the vaccine. One died of a heart attack. Other things happen to people. Things happen to people on a daily basis. And if you immunize 7 billion people, don't you think a lot of people are going to die?
Vincent,
because
what happened to the other 3? I think it's relevant.
The other 3 what?
You said 5 people died. One in a heart attack. One
Other events that, stroke,
Okay.
those kind of things that, and it's evenly distributed between the vaccine and the placebo. The thing that would concern you is if you saw, 10 events in the vaccine group and not in the placebo.
Yeah.
Now, you do see the muscle soreness, but those are minor. Those are considered minor adverse effects. Serious ones, like if you saw 10 strokes in a vaccine group and none in the placebo, that would concern you. And then you'd have to look into that. But we're not seeing that. If you go down the list, and it's like 3 pages long of all the side effects that were observed, they're always distributed evenly between the vaccine and the placebo group. So there's no indication that anything serious has happened so far.
Your major point, though, is for the 30,000 people who got the Pfizer vaccine in the phase 3 trial, which is what led to authorization. This data is public. It's somewhere out there.
Oh, it's all out there for sure.
That you or I, you have, and I could go inspect if I'm really actually concerned about this.
Yeah. So, for example, last week, in advance of the Pfizer FDA meeting, they put on the FDA website a 120-page document that Pfizer produced with all the data, all the people, the demographics, age, sex, et cetera, what doses they got and what they reported. It's all there. You can look at it. And then yesterday for Moderna, the same documents have been put up for tomorrow's hearing. So if you could just go to the website, you'll see links to all these PDFs. And most people don't go through them. 120 pages, right? And it may not be language that you understand. But there, for example, you could see all the side effects in the Moderna trial. So I would say, at these numbers, 30,000, 40,000 people, we have seen nothing untoward. Now, there are side effects that could happen, which are more rare. And one of these is called Guillain-Barre Syndrome. It's kind of a paralysis that you can get after certain infections or certain vaccinations. It's quite rare. It's about 1 in 400,000 or so in the general population. And we had an issue with the swine flu vaccine. I don't know if you remember, but back in 1976, there was a small outbreak of influenza in Fort Dix in New Jersey, and they thought it was going to be the next pandemic. So they made a vaccine and they immunized 140 million Americans. It was never the next pandemic. The virus never went anywhere. And it turned out that 400 or 500 people in the U.S. got Guillain-Barre, and some of them get permanent disabilities as a consequence of this. And so that's not good. That typically happens within 2 months. So we're past that already with these vaccines. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. You could have a side effect at a rate of 1 in a million, and you wouldn't see it now until you went into a bigger population. But then I would say to you, and then you say, it's always a risk benefit issue, right? You have to balance the risk of a vaccine effect versus the disease, right? Because then that in some people the disease can kill you, especially if you're over 65.
Something I really want to talk to you about later, Vincent, is and I think this is super relevant to bring up right now, is the implications of COVID-19 on long-term health are insanely terrifying.
Of course.
Holy shit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are so scary. People have to put this relative, right? If you have a 1 in 400,000 chance of getting temporary paralysis or some kind of complications related to the vaccine.
Yes.
But up to 88% of people are being shown to have long-term COVID implications that incur that are everything from brain damage to lung damage. It is absolutely terrifying.
And it's not just it's not just old people. It's not just old people.
It's young people. Yeah.
So we did an episode on our podcast where we had 2 long-term COVID patients. One of them was my age, in 60s, and the other was a young lady. And they both had, months and months and months of symptoms. So that's another thing. It's not just a matter of, getting pneumonia and maybe dying, but you could recover and have long-term symptoms. Yeah. So you have to balance it. You have to ask yourself, Do I think the risk is worth a 1 in a million chance that this vaccine is going to cause some issue? And frankly, I would take this vaccine today. It's not
instantly. Yeah. Without question.
I'm not in line. I mean, I'm 180 millionth in line if you use that calculator that they have online.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But if you offered it to me today, I would take it. I see no issues with this whatsoever. I give it to my whole family. I'd tell everyone to get it. So I don't see any issues. And I'm, a couple of weeks ago, people said, "Oh, the Pfizer vaccine caused Bell's palsy," right? Yeah, but it also did in the placebo arm. And they don't tell you that on the mainstream media. They just say it caused Bell's palsy. Well, it didn't cause, right? Because you just noticed that 6 people got Bell's palsy, which is a paralysis that happens in people. 3 in the vaccine and 3 in the placebo arm. So you need to look at the data before you jump to conclusions. And the mainstream media doesn't always do that. They, get their information other ways. So the other thing is some allergies have now been reported, right? Some people have gotten the vaccine, they have allergic reactions.
So most of the long-term safety effects that always show up in vaccines are after 3 months, correct? So after about 3 months, we kind of know more or less if there's going to be severe complications, and we've passed that threshold in the control.
We've passed that, but also some of them are more rare, and they, 1 in a million. The only one that I think might be relevant for this, there's a disease that you see in people who get the dengue vaccine or have been previously infected with dengue virus, where the second infection is much more severe than the first one. So it could be that you get this vaccine, the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, and then you go out, you're fine for 6 months, and then maybe next year you get infected and boom, you have a worse disease. That's called antibody-dependent enhancement. And so we haven't seen that. It's a theoretical possibility. I'm not worried about it, but we're going to keep our eyes out. That's why the safety tests are going to actually continue for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that true? They're going to keep tracking what happens. Say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So the phase 3 trial is not over. It goes on for 2 years from the first day those people were injected. And normally we would wait to license a vaccine till it's all over, because normally there's not a big rush. Normally people aren't dying left and right. So that's the trade-off you have to make. You have to do the EUA a little bit sooner, but normally we'd go a lot further out. But I think the likelihood of more serious disease after infection of a vaccinated person is very low for this virus. And so I don't see any negatives, frankly. I understand why people are worried, but I think they're mainly worried because they don't know how these things are tested and what they have to look for and so forth. It's not like every possible illness is going to result from vaccination. There's a certain few, like we said, Guillain-Barre and antibody-dependent enhancement and so forth.
Other than antibody-dependent enhancement, is there any serious concern a year out, 2 years out? Do vaccines ever come back to haunt us in that way, or at least with mRNA-type vaccines? It seems to me, is this actually, this is an assumption, but I guess I spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. Is because it's an mRNA vaccine and that we're not injecting actual viral cells, does that actually implicitly make it safer?
Yes,
it
because
feels like it does. Yeah, mm-hmm.
It's not a. So let's talk about other kinds of vaccines. Inactivated virus vaccines, right? Yeah. You take the virus, you grow it up in large quantities, and then you zap it with a chemical so it's not infectious. The danger there is that maybe you didn't inactivate it completely. And that happened once with the polio vaccine in the 50s. They didn't inactivate it completely, and some people got polio from the vaccine. And that happened within weeks after infection. But that's not what these vaccines are. They're mRNA. You can have infectious vaccines that paralyze people. So polio vaccine, the one that's infectious that you drink, 1 in 1.5 million people get polio from that vaccine. It's a known side effect.
Yeah.
So, and those are things that happen relatively quickly. Now, antibody-dependent enhancement can happen up to a year or more, depending on when you get infected after vaccination, right? And so that can go a long way. Then there's also other kinds of vaccine-related disease. So there were 2 experimental vaccines made years ago. One was a measles vaccine, not at all like the measles vaccine we use now. Another was against a childhood virus called respiratory syncytial virus. And they were made in such a way that when the kids got vaccinated, and then when they were naturally infected later, they got even worse disease than if they hadn't been immunized. So that's vaccine-enhanced disease. And we now know why that happened. The vaccine was just designed poorly.
Mhm.
It was a protein-based
Wow,
vaccine.
that's a disaster.
And
Doesn't
I
that
tell you, they spent 50 years trying to figure out what went wrong. We now know. And so that's not going to happen with these mRNA vaccines.
right? Because it's not an actual copy of the dead virus cells.
No, the mRNA is just simplicity, right?
Mhm.
The only thing you worry about is, well, the lipid components may cause some allergies in some people, and maybe even the nucleic acid, and whether having immunity is a problem down the road. But I see no evidence for that in these human coronaviruses. So I'm pretty confident. And I think, if you want, you can go and look at the literature, but it's hard to read. But I'm saying that there will be some side effects. They'll be very minor. They'll be rare, and you have to decide what's your risk benefit.
So, for a special question, there is people are asking about what about pregnancy and fertility. So when you talked about rare, often for at least medicines, sometimes the effects aren't seen until you have a child. What, if anything, do we know or can we say about this vaccine? Because I don't think we've tested that yet. I don't know if pregnant women were included or excluded from the trials. So maybe since you've looked more deeply into that, you can say a little bit about pregnancy and fertility and what we know with this vaccine.
So the pregnant women were not enrolled in the trial.
So we didn't test it on them.
We didn't, but some people got pregnant during the trial, as you might expect with 60,000 people, right?
Yes.
So,
people do that. How dare they? Step one, you're signing up for a year vaccine trial. Step two, please, no fun for that year.
So they have been, and there have been no issues with those pregnancies, as far as I know. But they're just a handful of people.
Right.
It's not the numbers. So
statistical.
Pregnant women will be tested separately after we're confident that these vaccines are completely safe, in the general population. As right now we haven't done kids under 18 or 16 years of age, right? And so we can't give that vaccine to that age group yet. So,
which is another important point, is the vaccine right now isn't authorized for use in minors, essentially.
No. So the Pfizer vaccine was tested in some 16 to 18-year-olds. And so the EUA includes 16 and up. But below 16, no, you cannot be given this vaccine. And the Moderna vaccine below 18 years of age. It will be tested in those populations eventually. But fortunately, those are a lower risk population than older people. So that's not a bad thing.
So as of right now, there's nothing known really about pregnancy or fertility or long-term, people would be worried about, for example, birth defects or other things like that. Anyway, there's basically nothing tested known.
No, that's correct. There's nothing known. But again, I say this is, it's a piece of mRNA encoding one virus protein. It's not like it's a replicating virus that could do something to a fetus, right? So I think the risks are much less than some of the other vaccines that we are using, which is not to say that the spike couldn't do something, but it is, again, it's injected in your arm. It's mainly going to stay in that region. It's not going to be disseminating throughout your body, the spike protein, that is. Now the antibodies and the T cells will, and they could cause some issues in theory, right? Because they can go throughout the body. So, that's why we will test it in pregnant women, just to be sure.
And then I'll turn it back to you in a sec, Devin. The other question I've heard is, what about, I've heard some about allergy, people having allergic reactions to this vaccine. Now, I know that can happen, when I get a flu vaccine, they ask me already if I'm allergic to eggs or egg products or whatever. But what's going on here with allergic reactions to this vaccine?
Right. So, people who have severe allergies are hypersensitive to many things, right? And this is a new thing being injected into you. It's a lipid and an RNA, and both of those can trigger immune reactions, which in turn can trigger allergies in a certain number of people. In the trials that were done so far, we didn't see any uh, allergic reactions that seemed to be caused by immunization. But of course, as soon as you move into the general population and start immunizing more people, you might see others. And so we saw, I think, 2 in the UK and 1 here in North America, people getting severe allergic reactions after being vaccinated. Now, we don't have a lot of data on that. We don't know if the vaccine was the trigger or if it was something else. We don't know how serious it is. But I would say, if you have allergies, first you have to, before you get this vaccine, you have to speak to your physician who knows what kinds of allergies you have, right? Because they're all very different, and how serious they might be. And it may be that you carry an EpiPen with you, which you probably do anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get this vaccine. In fact, one of these cases that they gave them epinephrine to quell the immune response. So I don't think that's a serious situation, especially if the numbers are low, but it's expected. You're expecting to have allergies of this sort.
Excellent. Devin, what would you like to go to next?
Do you feel like safety's been pretty well covered? I think someone asked in chat, and I don't really want to put this burden on you, but if you were to try to convince someone who doesn't believe this is safe, that it is, what would you lead with?
Well,
This
in
is a
the
hard
end,
question, but we have to deal with it. Yeah,
I do. Yeah, it's no problem. I deal with it all the time,
I
and
know.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to talk to people because I understand the concern. It's not like I want to minimize your concern. All right. I understand most people are not anti-vaxxers, but they're coming from a position of I'm concerned for my health. Totally get it. Right. Totally get it. So, of course, it depends your age group to a certain extent. If you're over 65, you should really rethink any hesitancy you have about this vaccine because you're in that group where the severity, the mortality is very high,
Mhm.
which is not to say that young people do not die. They do. It's just rarer, right? And that's why if you're below 18 and you're not vaccinated right now, it's probably okay because you're not likely to get life-threatening illness. So that's one part of the calculation. But I've looked at all these data as they come out at every paper that's published from these trials just involving Moderna and Pfizer. I've looked at all the safety data. I've looked at every patient, and I don't see anything so far that would raise flags for me in terms of safety. So I am convinced that to the extent they've been trialed, they are safe. Now, unless you're a healthcare worker and over 65, you're not going to get this vaccine for another 4 or 5 months anyway.
Yeah.
And by then, we're going to know a lot more about safety,
Mhm.
right? Because it's going to be in many, many people by then. And you can make a decision based on that if you would like. And, because I'm not going to get this vaccine for, I would say, until maybe April or May. And that's a lot more months of observation.
And many, many more millions of people.
And more people are going to be immunized. The people who are already immunized will go farther out and see if there are any longer term effects. They're going to be infected and see if there's any enhanced disease. So I don't think it's an issue because most of you who are out there are probably not healthcare workers and are not going to be immunized for a while, right? So right now we're doing healthcare workers and people in like nursing homes and those kinds of facilities who are at very high risk for getting infections.
Yeah, for those in the audience who don't know, about 40% of all deaths in the U.S. right now are coming out of nursing homes.
Yeah.
So 60% obviously coming from elsewhere, but about 40% are in the nursing home population. And so obviously important to try and protect them first.
And
Go
as
ahead,
you
Devin.
know, also many people who are in the front lines, right? Not just healthcare workers, but people who have to go to restaurants or stores and work every day and have people, they're getting a lot of sickness as well. So you'll be up there among the first to be immunized as well. Those individuals have been bearing a higher percentage of the serious illness because they
Yes.
have to work every day.
Well, they're exposed.
In New York City, the transit workers, the subways and the buses are still running. They're in there every day with a lot of contact, and they're at high risk. So they're the ones who should be immunized, and they have to say to themselves, if you have a choice, what's my risk benefit calculation. Do I think that I can, survive for another 6 months, or should I get this? I think that's really what you have to do. But realistically, I think most of you who are worried, you got time. You have probably 5-6 months to see some more data. And we could have another conversation, say in early next year, when many millions of people have been immunized, and I can say, hey, here are the data, nothing new or something serious, right?
We'd love to do that. Devin and I we learned so much from you.
Yeah,
Oh,
and it's
I
such
hope
so important too. I think safety as far as we can go. I'm really interested in this sort of asterisk that you put on protected from disease, in that. So there's two questions that kind of
Yes.
come from this. One is that you've said that the vaccine has over 90% efficacy. If we take that number literally, that means 1 in 10 people don't have efficacy. Number one, right? And then number
That's
two is what is your exact vernacular choice of protection against disease?
Right. So let's talk about that, because efficacy can mean different things. And
Mhm.
I was sitting in a doctor's office today and watching the TV, and they got it wrong. They said this vaccine is 94% effective at preventing against infection. That's not right. The two companies, Pfizer and Moderna, have asked, does the vaccine prevent disease? Any COVID related disease, mild, intermediate, or serious? Okay. And when you test vaccines, that's typically what you do. So when the polio vaccines were first developed, they injected kids, they injected placebo, and they said, who gets paralyzed and who doesn't? That's it.
Yeah.
They didn't look for infection.
Mhm.
They looked for disease. So here, Moderna and Pfizer said, we immunize 15,000 people with vaccine, 15,000 with placebo out in the world. Tell us when you get sick. That's it. Sick. They didn't say swab your nose every day and we're going to see if you get infected. That would be an interesting study to do. And I'm hoping that gets done at some point. But right now, all we know is 94% efficacy at preventing disease of any kind, from mild to severe.
So
It does
literally,
not
it's
mean
self-reported, though. In other words, that's very interesting. Those people may have all been hypothetically infected, but they didn't feel bad enough to tell the vaccine program,
Exactly.
I feel sick.
Yes. So they had symptoms, cough, fever, etc. And their instructions, which they took home with them for the trial, if you feel any of these symptoms, you got to let us know, and then take the self-swab kit that you have, send it in, and then they will do a diagnostic test to confirm that they're infected.
So very, very important in this is, does that include any kind of long-term symptoms outside of what you would normally expect? Like people report fatigue no matter what, but like things like neurological problems, any of the things we're seeing in long-term COVID cases of infection that did not show up in
The only neurological problem on this form that these participants got was loss of smell or taste.
Okay, which is consistent with COVID-19
COVID.
infection rate.
Yeah, that's one of the signature signs and symptoms of COVID, right?
Now is that was that temporary or like we're seeing in long-term cases, quite a few people have gotten a loss of smell and taste and it hasn't returned?
Well, it's an acute thing, right? They say when you first get this symptom, let us know right away, and then we don't know how long it continues, right? And it's only been a few months that this trial is ongoing, so we're really not in the frame of long-term COVID yet. So the answer is no. We're not looking for that, but these patients are all being followed up for 2 years. So we'll see. Some of the long-term
we'll learn
COVID,
more. But Devin's asking a great question, which is, what he's getting at is, we know that the long haulers, so-called, the people who get COVID and then have long-term problems, even though they don't die and they don't necessarily feel critical, they have these long-term problems, whether it's fatigue or circulatory. There's many different reported things.
It's pretty much
what he's getting at.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Devin.
Well, I think what I'm really getting at is, so I think that I'm personally concerned about infection of COVID-19. Once you're infected with the virus, I don't know, you can knock me over if I'm dead. I feel like that's probably better than having like a pulmonary embolism or neurological complications for the rest of my life. For me personally, right? As a result of the long-term COVID situation, which is terrifying. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. And I follow virology pretty aggressively. So like, I mean, we see this in some patients in other viruses, but like on
Yeah.
a widespread scale, what I'm asking is how likely is it that this vaccine, number one, induces possible long-term COVID symptoms, and number two, prevents them?
right,
Because does it prevent against infection? Yeah.
So we have not seen in any of the vaccines that it induces long-term COVID on its own, and it shouldn't because it's not an infectious agent at all.
Right. Mhm.
But there, you can get long-term COVID from an asymptomatically infected person. So you can have no symptoms when that virus first gets in you and it does its thing for 10 days and goes away. And then you can develop long-term COVID. So you can have an asymptomatic infection.
Yeah. I know
And
that, yeah.
so the vaccine trials are not looking at that, but maybe it could very well be. Let's do a hypothetical. Maybe the vaccine prevents disease, but not infection. So
Mhm.
you can get vaccinated. The virus will come in you, it'll reproduce, shed it, and maybe you get long-term COVID months later. We'll see as we follow these individuals up.
So the answer is we don't know if the vaccine prevents infection.
No, absolutely not. I want people to get that from this, if anything. The fact we do not know if the vaccines prevent infection. There's limited data from Moderna where they had some fraction of the people do weekly swabs. And then they said, is the vaccine knocking down infection, asymptomatic infection?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was, in that sense, there was in the small number of people that they looked at that, and 58% efficacy at preventing infection, 94% for disease, but only 58% for preventing infection. But it's a small number of people and they need to do a lot more. So the point here is that these vaccines may not prevent you from being infected, but they will prevent you from getting sick. And that has very big implications, obviously, right? Because if only half the population got vaccinated, say, that would mean the other half could still be infected as the virus goes through the vaccinated people and is transmitted, right?
Yeah.
So we need to vaccinate a lot of people. That's maybe what we end up having to do.
But can I be clear? This is a really important point. You said clearly we don't know if the vaccine prevents infection. In the same way, do we not know if it does prevent infection? Is it a 50-50? Is it a could it prevent infection as easily as it couldn't? How does the science shake out on that?
Well, most human vaccines don't prevent infection.
Oh.
Polio vaccines do not prevent infection. The measles vaccine does not prevent infection. They prevent disease, which is really what you are concerned about. And that's why we like to get a lot of people immunized, so everybody is protected.
The question at the bottom of this that we are speculating because we don't know is the long-term side effects people are having from getting COVID, the long-term symptoms. If they don't develop full-blown COVID because the vaccine does prevent disease, are they less likely to also develop the long-term complications? Because that's what Devin's worried about is, will he get these long-term complications?
Yep.
And so
I'm tired of having, I'm like terrified of having a brain slug. That's it. Like,
and so I think so first thing is we clearly don't know. The data is not there yet. Second thing is with this small number of people, 58% of the Moderna people who did the swabs did not apparently get infected, which is good.
Right.
And then the third piece is it's logical. Doesn't mean it will be true. This is pure reasoning. It's abstract and could easily not turn out that way. But that if you're not developing enough of an infection to feel sick, you are then less likely to also have the brain slug that you're worried about. But that's a guess.
No, as I've said, people have had asymptomatic infections and still develop long-term COVID.
Yeah.
Oh,
because
okay.
it doesn't seem to be the virus that is doing the long-term. It's your body's response to infection that is somehow unhinged.
COVID-19 can pass the blood-brain barrier, for example, and cause neurological complications, right? So you may
Yeah,
have it.
but it's not in it's pretty rare. I looked at
Yeah.
some studies
Mhm.
recently, and the number, so they did an autopsy study with 30 or 40 patients who had died, and only a small number of them had actual virus in the brain.
Yeah, but
So, and
but they did. Like,
yeah,
and
but
there was
you know,
another.
many more people have neurological symptoms, and so I think they are an indirect result of infection. I don't think they're all
Oh,
virus
mhm.
getting into the brain.
The
But
other
look,
one.
you could have a mild infection, not have any symptoms, and the virus triggers something which then gives you later long-term COVID. That's absolutely plausible, I think. And if the vaccine doesn't prevent infection, then you might still be able to develop long-term COVID, even if you're vaccinated. I think that is highly unlikely because I think the vaccines are going to knock down virus levels in you, the viral loads,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that probably is going to make a difference. But we'll know within the next 6 months or so. But it's very important. I agree. And I
Mhm.
don't want people to think that these vaccines are preventing you from getting infected. So you can't get your shot and rip off your face mask and go about life as usual. You're going to have to wait until most people are immunized in the country before you can do that, or at
Well,
least in
the
your
other
bubble.
reason to do that is the vaccines are not 100% effective. Even if I get my 2 shots, they're about 95%, which still means I have a 1 in 20 chance. So if I run around to my
Mm,
favorite rave right after that, and you know, I
sure.
am still with no mask. If I take enough 1 in 20 chances, I'm going to get burnt.
Yes. No, you're right. It's not 100%. It's never 100%. And that's why we want as many people as possible to be immunized. And with most vaccines, the flu vaccine being an exception, we do pretty well here in the US. And other countries do very well
So
at approaching 100% immunization. Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused. Is like you're talking about immunization, but what that really means is that sort of the infection, since this doesn't prevent against infection, everybody, presumably a high enough percentage of people do get infected, even if they are vaccinated. They don't produce symptoms for the vast majority because they're the antibodies, the viral, like you said, the viral load is lower. The antibodies fight against the virus successfully. So what immunization really looks like, everybody kind of getting COVID-19, and then, or the large percentage of getting COVID-19, and then as an infection, whether they're vaccinated or not, and then that being the case at some point. Is that correct, or how are we looking at it?
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
if everyone could get infected naturally, that would work. But the problem is that too many people would die, right?
No, I'm saying everyone's going to get infected anyway if the vaccine doesn't prevent infection. It just if like yeah, we're going to
Yes,
lower
that's
death
correct.
rates and we're going to lower symptoms, but
Yeah,
what
that's correct.
essentially, here's an easier way to answer this because I think I'm asking a difficult question of how you're defining immunity. Immunity means essentially ubiquitous infection.
So that's a great question. How do you
Hmm.
define it is important. You can define it in two ways. You could say immunity to disease or to infection, and they're two very different things. You got to keep them separate, right? So we're looking for these vaccines that are being tested now to prevent disease. We're looking for
Hmm.
immunity to disease. Whether they give you immunity to infection is another question, which isn't being looked at, but will be eventually. They may or may not give you immunity to infection. I just think you have to interpret it with the data we're getting. We're not getting any data except for this small numbers in the Moderna trial about immunity to infection, because all that's being tested is whether you get sick or not. Okay, so it could very well be, yes, if you immunized everyone, then everyone would get infected every year because this virus is going to be around forever.
Hmm.
That would boost your immunity and that would protect everyone. And that's what happens with the common cold coronavirus is everyone gets infected every year. Everyone has a low level of immunity and you get infected the next year. You never get sick because you're protected against disease, not infection. So the common cold coronas, they induce immunity to disease, not to infection. So I suspect this virus is going to end up doing the same thing. I could be wrong.
Hmm.
That's my prediction. But in the end, it's good because people don't die, right? Very few people die of common cold coronavirus infections, and 90% of the world is infected every year.
I think our differential is I appreciate that you're your kind of KPI or goal or your sort of success metric is mortality. I think that's really important. I think about a lot of the economic implications and the enormous um, burden on our medical system of potentially 80 out of 100 patients that get COVID-19 having some kind of further complications, which doctors don't seem to be able to do anything about. Maybe we should transition into long-term COVID. I'm
Well,
obviously really
I mean,
fascinated about that. Yeah,
so first of all, it could be that the vaccine prevents long-term COVID. We
yeah, I
don't know. I'm
understand
just
that.
giving you
Yeah.
the
hmm
scenarios, right,
hmm
of what could happen. I'm hoping that but I just don't want you to assume that these vaccines are preventing infection when
Yeah.
we don't
hmm
test for that yet. We may eventually, and it may turn out to be at least protective enough so that we don't get any long-term COVID. But we just don't know at this point. In the early next year, we may know. Who knows? Now, in terms of long-term COVID, all kinds of very ill-defined symptoms, right? Not unlike chronic fatigue syndrome,
hmm
right? Which has been
Yeah.
recognized for decades as something that seems to happen after an infection of some kind. And then people end up with lifelong fatigue and other issues, neurological problems of all sorts that were initially triggered by an infection.
hmm
So this looks just like that, except it's a different virus, right? And in fact, I keep I follow the CFS literature, and those patients are going nuts because they say for decades we have been complaining and no one pays attention to us, and
Yeah.
now all of a sudden there's long-term COVID and they're getting all this attention. It's the same thing or very similar disease, so to them it's very frustrating. And maybe this will stimulate more research into CFS as well. That could be the outcome because there's so many people, as you said, that are developing long-term COVID
And I
after the
and I
vaccine.
understand chronic fatigue syndrome is one of the primary long haul COVID like reports. I'm a little bit more concerned about the secondaries, which are lung and neurological damage. Do you think there's any particularly? So we know that COVID-19 um, can do permanent damage to lungs,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
sure,
Okay.
absolutely, for sure.
hmm
I mean, my colleague Daniel Griffin talks about patients who have her lungs are shot. They need a lung transplant, and that's becoming more and more common. Your lungs are completely shot. There's no way they're going to recover. You need to have a lung transplant. And
Oh,
yes, uh,
hopefully this is rare. I hadn't heard that, but that's a pretty brutal side effect.
it's relatively rare, but I just saw a paper, a case study series the other day, documenting it in multiple patients and saying, okay, the only solution is a lung transplant. Um, he sent his patient home. She'd been in a hospital for 2 months, no more virus, couldn't get off oxygen, had to send her home with oxygen, right? The only way. And she said, I'm finally able to stand up because just standing up exhausted her.
Yeah.
So yes, this is a big deal, and on the neurological issues as well, of all sorts. From brain fog to cognitive issues and perception and so forth, seem to be altered for sure. But the good news is, okay, that so many people are developing this at a time when this pandemic is very visible to the medical community. They're getting attention. NIH is putting money into this. They're saying we have to figure out how to treat these patients because right now we don't know how to treat them.
Yeah.
They're figuring out how to do that, and they're getting attention that the ME/CFS community never got. So that's good, and I'm pretty confident that they're going to have solutions at some point. I did, as I said, I did a podcast with two individuals who have long-term COVID themselves. One is a physician who researches CFS.
hmm
All right, she got long-term COVID, and the other is a journalist by the name of Fiona Lowenstein, who started a support group for long-term COVID patients. And there's thousands of people who are networking and trying to get help and so forth. So it's markedly different from the ME/CFS story, which started very small and never got a lot of traction, unfortunately. So I think you're concerned that what are we going to do about these patients is being addressed. It's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately, but therapeutic modalities are going to be sorted out for sure. I have
The
no doubt.
um. Okay. It seems like such a wide. Okay, actually, I have a much better question. is the long-term effects that are coming from COVID, is that abnormal for a virus? Is this a virus that seems to cause more long-term effects in our population than, say, a flu that comes along? Or is this consistent with other viruses that commonly infect human populations?
Well, of course, it depends on the population, because ME/CFS patients have any number of virus infections that seem to trigger. They can have a common cold, they can have influenza, they can have a herpes infection, cytomegalovirus. So there's no one virus. It just seems to be an immune trigger. And one of the theories is that you make some autoantibodies that are involved in the disease, right? The COVID seems to be different because it's a brand new virus and so many people are getting it all at once, right? Whereas the ME/CFS, it's asynchronous. People are getting viruses left and right of different sorts. So I think a lot of viruses in the right patient, depending on some aspect of your genetics, will cause these long-term effects. And the only reason it's accentuated for COVID is because there's so many infections ongoing right now.
I understand that. What I'm asking, I think, very importantly, is if that differs, if COVID is an abnormal virus in that sense.
I don't think it is. It's just
really?
abnormal in the sense that it is brand new to the human population. It's infecting, hundreds of millions of people. And that's a perfect situation to see an accentuated side effect like this, right? If this were, not causing pandemics, you would see some disease like long COVID, but not all at once. So I don't think it's unusual. No, I think flu and herpes viruses and other viruses can do similar things.
Yeah.
It's just that the extent of infection is.
There's so much attention on this and so many people with it. You're essentially, what you're saying, whether it turns out to be true or not statistically, is that the discussion about long haul symptoms is because we have this disease under a microscope right now. There's so much focus.
Well, because there's so many infections, right?
Well, what
one time.
If we use like a literal example, right? There lots of COVID-19 patients have been that have had long-term symptoms, have had lung damage. But we've seen in pneumonia, for example, the exact same thing. So like what I'm asking is, like, does COVID-19 sort of numerically report any kind of particular long-term symptoms that seem inconsistent with other viruses? Basically, that like for example, COVID-19 might seem to have like a higher rate of lung damage or brain damage among people. Is there anything like that, or is it just consistent with, like you just said, because we see this infection in millions of people at a time? We're now getting these reports consistent with what would happen with any other virus. I understand there's complications with herpes viruses.
No, I don't think there's anything special. I just think the numbers are part of it, and it's a brand new virus that is ripping through the population. And once that's done, in 10 years or so, you will see much less of this. It will be sporadic, but you'll still see the same thing. And I would say, any virus that's new to the population does different things. When HIV came in, I've never seen immunosuppression before like that, right? And all these secondary infections. And turns out a lot of viruses can do that. When Ebola infects people, it rips through many organ systems. And that was unusual. But turns out that a lot of viruses that cause hemorrhagic fevers, right? So I think it's a matter of what we're aware of. I don't think this is anything unusual. I think this is just another virus, frankly. It just happens to be infecting a heck of a lot of people and causing havoc.
I think that's actually really important, because that totally changes my view on COVID. I viewed COVID as having abnormal long-term effects, and I guess that particularly triggered me because, like, I've been concerned a long time about like neurological implications from viruses, like HSV1 and 2, and that's really interesting that you say that it has no. So to be clear, the take that I get from that is that there isn't really any meaningful difference in long term. Like, we're going to see long haul patients in nearly all viral infections, and that COVID isn't abnormally percentage ticked up as a result of that.
Yeah, I think many viruses have long term effects, in that most of them have been in humans for many years. So the population has evolved with them, and learn to live with them. This is just brand new, and it's going to be a while before we equilibrate, I think. I mean, that is my opinion.
Yep.
You know, not everyone will agree with me, but that's how I view it.
Should people who are who have had COVID in the past and tested positive get vaccinated?
Yeah, that's a question that's come up a bunch. If I've had it.
Yeah. I get that all the time, and I say we do not know how durable natural immunity is. Although I said earlier that I think it could be a years. We don't have a definitive answer, so I would say yes, you should be vaccinated. There's no downside to that, and it's going to boost your immunity. So I think it's a good idea. They're not going to. Someone asked me. Several people have asked me, why don't they check you first for antibodies before you get vaccinated, right? And that would, it's already a complicated undertaking to immunize so many people at once, right? And that would make it even more complicated to give you a test and have you come back and so forth. But I don't think it's necessary. I think you just need to immunize everyone. Yeah.
Well, the argument that's been here in chat is with a limited supply of vaccine, maybe we're wasting it on people. If we could quickly, to your point, there's complexity. If we could quickly sort out who's been tested,
right,
who's been infected and recovered, then we could give the vaccine to the people who really need it, in quotes.
Right. But even if let's say, okay, the logistics aside, we don't know if, everyone's going to have a different level of antibodies, right? You're going to have 1 to 10. Someone's going to have 1 to 200, 1 to 50. Which one is the right level?
Enough.
What's the cutoff? We have no idea what the cutoff would be, so we can't do it.
Okay. So a question that I've seen a lot here, it's surprising to me, but I'd love your take on it. We've had several people say that they're smokers or their whole family smokes and they haven't gotten COVID. And there have been rumors, I guess, that either smoking, vaping, or nicotine are somehow protecting people from infection. Do we know anything? I have my own perspectives about that, like maybe, but is there anything that we know medically?
Well, the studies I have seen, and I've looked at a few, actually associate a higher risk of severe COVID with smoking and that sort of thing. So I have not seen any protection, and it would make no sense biologically that you would be protected, because smoking compromises your immune response in your lungs and makes you in general susceptible to respiratory infections. And that's what the literature is supporting. In fact, early on, there was a paper showing that smoking upregulated the cell receptor for the virus, right? Turns it up. And so, which would only make the cells more infectable. So I don't think there's anything to that. You're just lucky that you haven't been, and it so happens that you smoke. Sometimes these things are coincidental.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to ask because it had come up several times. I agree with you. It seems like anything for a disease that attacks the lungs, things that compromise the lungs, which smoking does, would be detrimental, but you never know about medical interaction. So I wanted to check about what we actually knew.
Yep. People just tell these stories, man. If I breathe out the smoke, it creates a shield. And protects against the virus.
Well, we do have to,
no, it's good. You want to clarify these.
We're trying to debunk some of the reasons people.
Your chat's just looking for more excuses to smoke weed, is what's going on here, man. Like that's.
Yes. Well, chat did also ask if I have high CBD usage, what will that do? And I until now, I chose not to address that question, except to say they'd probably be hungry or sleepy.
There are many things, I'll call them things, like CBD and other treatments of various sorts that people want to know if it's going to help or not. But the only way you know if something is worthwhile, say to prevent serious disease, is to do a trial like we're doing with the vaccine trials. And, vitamin D, for example, right? There have been some studies which associate higher vitamin D levels with less severe COVID in some countries, right? And that could very well be, but you cannot make an observational study. You say measure vitamin D in people and see if they get serious COVID. That's an observation. It doesn't mean it's causation. You have to do a trial where you take people and supplement them with vitamin D, but that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And for vitamin D, just take it. Right? Because it's good for you. And if you're not getting a lot of sun like me, you just take it, and it's not an issue.
To me, it seems pretty interesting though that like over 85% of cases that present in most hospitals have long-term vitamin D deficiency as well, right? So that's like I said, that's not a correlation, but it's very interesting. And I
Very
yeah
interesting. I
yeah
agree.
hmm
And it's very easy to get vitamin D pills. They're
yeah.
cheap, and everyone should be taking them. And most physicians will recommend that you simply take them. And because, as I say, no one's going to do a trial for vitamin D. And so in the meantime, just take it. And that's the end of that story. But there are many other things that are not as easy to say, just take it, right? And
Well, I have
they're
some.
problematic.
I have a really interesting follow-up question to this. This is something that I think on other shows and podcasts that talk about this a lot, like Joe Rogan, he's always obsessed with this idea of can we build up our immunity? So and I'll put this to you in this question. If we are to sit for 5 to 6 months before we can receive a vaccine, right? Other than the things that I think we've platformed already and I think are obvious, wear a mask, right? Stay 6 feet away from people, socially distance as much as you possibly can. Are there things we can do that as I asked you this question before, and the answer was nebulous because we didn't have a lot of time. And have you discovered anything that you suspect would lead towards better immune function if we were to get COVID-19 in the following 5 to 6 months while we're waiting for a vaccine?
What can we do to best position ourselves to avoid it or thrive? I love this question, right? Other than face mask and social distance,
Yeah,
if we're going to, what can we do to prepare our
if you tell me to
bodies?
do 50 push-ups a day, like I'm down. Like what do I got to do? Like yeah.
Well, I mean, no one has done studies to answer your question, right? Because there's
Damn it, get on it.
There's so many things that you could test. But what we do know,
What do you suspect?
is that there are ways that we know to keep a robust immune system, right? Which just includes general things that make sense, right? Like getting enough sleep, eating properly, exercising, right? Have healthy habits, don't smoke, don't overdrink, and so forth. These things compromise your immune system. And we simply know that that gives a better outcome for infectious diseases in general, right? And there's no magic bullet there. But in fact, many people don't have good habits. They don't have good lifestyle habits. They don't get enough sleep. I mean, sleep is one of the biggest ones. You get 2 hours of sleep a night, your body is just trashed, and it's not going to make a good immune response to infection. So if anything, try and get more sleep, try and eat properly, try and make sure you're getting, the right amount of all the vitamins that you would need. These are just things we've known for years, and they make perfect sense, but they will never be assessed in the context of COVID, except in an associative study, like you said. Some people who have serious COVID have low vitamin D levels. That's as far as it's going to go with that. So there's no magic, unfortunately. Age is a big factor, as you know, right? Being old sucks for COVID.
Yeah.
Mortality rates are really high. So nothing you can do about that.
Don't be old. Yeah, be less old.
And why is that? Your immune system declines as you get old, right? Your immune system declines. Your bone marrow, which contains precursors to all of your immune cells, that gets depleted as you get older. And in fact, you can't make memory cells, immune cells of certain kinds as you age. And that's why you get more serious infections as you age. Bottom line, mammals did not evolve to live a long time for the most part. And usually it's past reproduction, and that's it, buddy. Everything else is gravy past reproduction, because that's all that matters in evolution.
It's true. Yeah. Damn.
So we've covered a lot of great questions. One we haven't gotten to is what percentage of the people I would like to know when I get to go back to quote unquote normal life. How many people have to get vaccinated, and when might that happen to where I can go back to restaurants and spend time with friends? There's a light at the end of the tunnel. How long is the tunnel?
Sure there is. I think next summer we probably start to get back to normal. I mean, it could be earlier, but I would predict next summer. Most people are going to be immunized by then, or enough to give you some kind of herd immunity. 70%, is the number we think that has to be immunized. So, but you don't have to have a lockdown until then. That's the thing. If the reason we do lockdowns is because people don't observe proper non-pharmaceutical intervention procedures, and then the virus goes crazy as it is now, and then you have to lock down. But I think you can do things without a lockdown as long as you distance and so forth and take precautions. But this year has gone pretty quickly, I think, at least for me. So I say next summer, less than a year from now.
So next summer, just people are confused because it's December. You mean 7 months from now, the summer of 2021, right? Not 2022.
No, I think 2021 is the year that we get back to normal for sure. That's why we're rushing these vaccines. Otherwise, we'd take our time.
Okay.
Now, that's the U.S. And many other countries. I saw an estimate today that, every country in the world will not be immunized until 2024. And that's a tragedy in my view, right? People really should be able to get immunized next year, but that's, not every country is lucky or fortunate as we are, sadly. But the U.S., yes, we will be fixed next year. And, in the early months of 2021, we're going to have ramping up of vaccine production. Both Pfizer and Moderna said they can make 1 billion doses next year. And many of those will come in the first months. So I'm pretty confident that by the summer, we'll have a good fraction of the population immunized and circulation will be way down for sure. And I think we go back to school in the fall of 2021 the way it used to be. That's my thought.
All right. So this is a little bit, I have a guest who says, hello, Dr. Racaniello. First of all, I love your work. Here's my question. Here in Brazil, there was a study which associated BCG, parentheses, tuberculosis, vaccinated people to better immunity to COVID. Is this association plausible?
Okay, so that brings up a great little line of discussion.
All right, we've got him excited. Good job.
So there are two different things with vaccines. First of all, some vaccines seem to give you some short-term protection, and BCG is one of them. Polio vaccine is another one. Even influenza vaccine. These are vaccines that are infectious, where the agent is, infectious. And they seem to give you some kind of general early immune boost that lasts for 3 or 4 months. And so they're doing actually a clinical trial with BCG in healthcare workers to see if it gives them that protection. I think that's a great idea because, getting another vaccine, which is already approved and safe, makes perfect sense to me. So hopefully that one will work out. The other thing I want to tell you about, though, is there seemed to have been some correlation between getting measles, mumps, rubella vaccine and protection against serious disease also, just like the BCG. And that seemed to last longer. And it turns out, and we did a study, we looked at this study on TWIV recently, the immunization with measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. There are 3 different viruses in it. It turns out that the mumps component will protect you against severe COVID-19 for as long as the titers are at a certain level. And there seems to be, which is really weird, it's not this general 3-month thing with BCG. It's a longer-term protection based on actual antibodies that seem to cross-react between mumps virus and SARS-CoV-2. So
wow.
If you want to do something, go get Mmr vaccine. You probably got it already. You'll get a boost, and you may be protected against SARS-CoV-2. I think those studies look pretty damn good.
Why aren't more people talking about that?
Yeah, same question.
We have 100,000 listeners on my podcast. That's a fraction of the world. That's the reason. They listen to Joe Rogan and they don't get the right stuff. Okay, come listen to TWIV.
There it is.
There goes the gauntlet, Devin. You've got to get Vincent on Joe Rogan now. This is your quest. Do you accept?
How am I supposed to do that, dude? Let me just call him
I'm very excited about this MMR because MMR, man, a lot of people get it. The numbers look great. The paper where we did it a couple of weeks ago on TWIV, I would take MMR vaccine. Go to your doctor and say, I want MMR. They'll go, really? Sure, here, have it. No downside.
I just want to clarify what you just said. that you can get an MMR booster shot, and like one of the leading virologists in the world, are relatively confident that that prevents serious complications with COVID-19. That's what you just said.
The data look good, and there are no downs. Okay, it's like vitamin D. As long as you don't exceed the dose, there are no downsides. So that's what I'm looking for. Something that's pretty harmless. You get boosted to MMR, and you may get protection to SARS-CoV-2.
Wow. So that's actually going to go on my to-do list
For how
real
long? Yeah,
right
same.
away.
Yeah.
But when we were asking you earlier, Vincent, about what could we do to like protect ourselves, man, that
would have been good.
That's the category of answer we're looking like. The hell with vitamin D.
Yeah, that would have been like he just like you might as well have been like, yeah, by the way, if you put on this hat, it shows that like it just prevents COVID-19 entirely.
The Brazilian reminded me, thanks to the guy in Brazil, because so vitamin D and MMR vaccines, those two things, those are no-brainers. Harmless. Of course, vitamin D, you don't want to overdose because that's bad.
Yeah.
But take the amount that's recommended. MMR vaccine, one boost could protect you for years. So no downside to that either. Absolutely no downside.
So
wow.
If you've already had an MMR vaccine, getting a boost like that, there's no complications to get another one, is what you're saying. Okay.
There's no complications. And I tell you, the data are amazing. Do I have this slide here? Let me see if I can pull it up quickly, because the data are going to just blow you away. Let me go back to, in the meantime, you can ask me another question if you'd like, but I got to show this to you.
I think we're both focused on this one. Yeah. So MMR vaccine, what does that stand for? That's the measles,
mumps, rubella. And it turns out it's the mumps part that is the part that's protective. Here you go. It was in MBio. And this is the slide. Can I share my
please go right ahead. It worked great last time.
God, that is nuts, man. That another vaccine has
crossed. Can you enable
Oh, I need to enable screen sharing. Sorry. Yes, I have to remind myself how to do that.
I'm sharing.
Yeah, people can see it.
All right, so this is a figure from the paper. This is mumps titer. So this means antibodies to mumps virus that you get from the vaccine versus COVID severity. This is only 50 people, but look at this. This is the titer here, and these are the difference. And this is people who are basically immune. They never get sick. They have the highest titers of mumps antibodies. Then people who are asymptomatic, some low symptom score, they have lower titers. As the titers go down, mild disease, moderate COVID, and severe COVID, they have the lowest levels of mumps antibodies.
This is insane.
Wow. Yeah, this is like,
listen, this is a correlation, right? It is not causation.
Causality, yeah. It hasn't been tested.
This is so easy for you to get an MMR vaccine, and there's no downside to this. There's no negative to getting this.
So the MMR vaccine, just say quickly how old it is, how well tolerated it is, because it's another vaccine. So if I don't want a vaccine, I don't want this one either, logically. But maybe you can say a few things.
That's fine. I mean, MMR was developed in the 60s. It's been given, to hundreds of millions of people globally. It protects against infection with these three viruses. You get it as a kid. And here's the thing, as you age, your titers go down. And as you age, you get more severe COVID. So, if you're in your 60s, get an MMR shot or even lower. But it's not proven. I totally agree. It's not proven. But I would do this. And I think there's no downside to getting an MMR vaccine.
No, I mean, I've already had it, right? I wouldn't be worried about.
Yeah.
If you've already had it, should you get another one?
Oh, it doesn't hurt because
I had it
over time,
as a kid or whatever, right? So you can get a booster.
I mean, Devin, you're 65. You can get one, right?
54. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was born in 65. Yeah.
So anyway, that is very cool, I think. Better than the BCG, because the BCG is just a couple of months, apparently. After you get that vaccine, it wanes in a few months. But this seems to last many years.
Wow.
That's
all right.
Unreal, man. That's one of the craziest things I've ever heard. That's nuts.
Yeah, and
like to have listeners asking questions. They always prod you, to dig into your head.
I agree. That's my whole show when I am not doing this with you is listener questions usually, and that's why.
Yeah, I love listener questions. We do that on the podcast all the time. They just come up with the best stuff for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, well, that was, man, I feel like this show just paid for itself completely right there.
Yeah.
And now we're going to have a run on MMR.
Nah, luckily there's 10,000 people, about 11,000 people listening. That won't crush the supply of MMR vaccine.
No, there's plenty of doses. Yeah. Plenty of doses.
So what else, Devin? I've covered a lot, and we've covered some listener questions. What else do you have?
Chat, go. Well, man, a lot of my questions were around the two main questions that I brought in were
Long haul,
and also what can we do for prevention.
Well, those we've nailed them.
Yeah, and we've covered those. Let me check
I have one. Then I'll buy you some time.
Yeah.
Vincent, what happens if I only get one of the shots? So I go get a shot, for whatever reason I don't get the other.
So I think the Pfizer study, they looked at efficacy after the first shot, and there is some protection, but it's not as good. It's not at 94%. It's not as good as after two. So you will get some, if you can't get the second shot for whatever reason, and a lot of people can't get both. So you are partially protected, I would say, but I would, really strongly suggest you get both. So
of course.
Okay. I have tons of questions.
I'm in violent agreement. I'm just, so not surprisingly, half the shots, maybe not exactly half the protection, but some portion. So
yeah.
What kind of quality assurance is being done on the vaccines that are coming out? Particularly one that's interesting is that because they're being stored at low temperatures, what happens if one heats up, destabilizes, gets injected into a human? How likely is that, do you think? What's the, I think, how likely are we to run into problems with distribution when we're trying to do something with a new vaccine at a logistical level that we've never done before?
No, I'm concerned for sure.
Okay.
Outside the U.S., a lot of countries that will not be able to deal with this Pfizer vaccine. They don't have dry ice. They don't have cold freezers. It's a real problem. But here, I think in general, we're okay. But still, there will be places where, it goes to, right now, it's going to institutions, right? Mainly hospitals and nursing homes where they know how to take care of pharmaceuticals, and they know the importance of keeping them at the right temperature. But, in 6 months, when it goes to a doctor's office, they may, keep it a little bit longer. And yeah, it could be a problem for you. And your antibody titer won't be as good if you get a less potent vaccine because it hasn't been refrigerated. That's the problem with any vaccine. We know that it can compromise immunity. But, the only thing you can do is if you're getting in your doctor's office, you can ask them, how long has this been? Oh, I just took it out of the freezer this morning. You can be proactive and try and find out. I don't think it's an issue now because, as I said, these things are being thawed and injected right away. Nothing's being stored in the freezer for long periods.
And there are a lot of people working. You can read about this. There are a lot of people working on the distribution chain, trying to make sure it stays intact.
Yes.
It is really, for those math geeks who want to go through it, it's a really tough question of how do I want to immunize in the US, forgetting worldwide for a moment, and we want to immunize the world. 300 million people, they need 2 shots each, so it's 600 million people. You need someone who can inject all of those. If you actually back into the logistics, I back of the enveloped it today, and you need 10,000 people injecting full time, 40 hours a week for a year. Like you need 10,000 to get through everyone. That's kind of the raw math of what it takes. And I've assumed in that 5 minutes per patient to fill out the paperwork and give the shot. Obviously some will be faster, some, but like the point is that's totally doable. There are more than 10,000 nurses there, but all those people also have jobs today. So we're going to be busy. It's a logistical challenge.
I mean, I am not worried about a thawed vial of vaccine being at the fridge too long. I'm worried that the dry ice in the container is going to go out and then people don't have access to dry ice. That's more of an issue. But in these next weeks, that's not going to be a problem. It will be a problem in the months
GP.
next year after February, say, when there's a lot more vaccine around. Then I think it could be an issue.
Well, I guess like I'm more worried about like you've got a truck full that dry ice failed. Human beings make mistakes. I guess
Sure.
what happens when a vaccine destabilizes? It's just ineffective.
Well, if it's this mRNA vaccine, it breaks up, and so
Yeah.
now it's no longer going to give you an immune response, right?
So you would just be injected with something that like a placebo. It doesn't work, but you
Yeah,
wouldn't know
exactly. Exactly. Now, I don't know if they're building in, sensors into the boxes that say, "Oh, this box has been at room temp for too long." They could do that, obviously, right?
it. Yeah.
They put water sensors in your phone so they know when you've got water in them, right? So
Mhm.
they could do that. So I don't know if that's been done. It may be, but yeah, I agree. It's an issue. I worry about the cold chain for sure.
Couple of
Someday we're not going to need a cold chain for vaccines. We're going to have stabilized vaccines that don't need it, but we're not there yet.
And I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
What do you see next in the evolution of these vaccines? In other words, how long will it be till there's a V2? When do we get the room temperature stable, better versions, or?
So there are two things. They're the temperature and the delivery. We have to change both of them. We have to be able to do room temp for long periods of time and even high temperatures. And we have to get rid of the needles. Needles are just crazy. All the needles that we need. You need a trained person to give you a shot, and they're all going to go. 5 to 10 years. We can right now already. We put sugar into the vaccine to stabilize it, and it becomes thermostable for many, many days at very hot temperatures, almost 98 degrees temperatures. And that's being tested in various trials with different vaccines. Eventually, it'll come to this one too. And the needles is a very cool technology called a microneedle patch. If you just Google microneedle patch, you'll see these little squares. They're about a centimeter square with tiny, tiny plastic needles. The vaccine is saturated into this, and then it's put on your skin with a Band-Aid. And the vaccine is delivered to your skin, which is a really good place
That's
to put a
insane.
vaccine. Lots of immune cells there. And then you get a great immune response. And you can put it on with a Band-Aid. You don't need a syringe. Those are all going to happen within 5 years or so.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. That's like some science fiction stuff.
And I think that getting rid of needles is good because a lot of parents don't like to have their kids stuck with needles, and it probably
kids don't like it either.
Yeah, kids don't like it either, right?
So one question we didn't get to is mutations.
Yeah.
So we're doing all this great work. We're getting a vaccine. There's some talk about the virus is pretty well known or thought to have jumped to mink, the fur-bearing animal, maybe some other things.
Right.
Is this all sound and fury signifying nothing because we're going to get this back from minks or dogs or cats or rats or bats, and it's going to be different? And so COVID-21 is coming next year.
I'm worried about this. Yes, it is
shit.
a possibility.
We got Devin to sit right back up.
I just thought he wasn't worried about it because the last time we talked about him, he wasn't, but now he is. Okay.
Oh, we know a lot more. We've seen this virus go into many animals. It's going to go into wild mice, I'm quite sure, the mink. But there is a solution. I don't know if it would change and then be a problem in people, right?
Kill all the humans.
It's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
We can't kill all the animals, but we can immunize a lot of them. People who grow mink, just immunize your bloody mink. You could make a mink vaccine in 2 months. Easy. I'm sure people are doing it. We immunize
less safety concern.
Pigs. We immunize all kinds of animals. We can immunize mink. We can immunize the people who work with them. So any farmed animal that's susceptible, taken care of, immunize it. No problem. We do that with pigs and chickens and fish already.
Isn't that a problem though? Like if you've got a random bat in China that flaps into a market and then dies and then gets eaten, and isn't that what caused COVID-19 in the first place?
Well, it came from bats, for sure.
Yeah.
But we can't get rid of all. Someone said, "Why don't we kill all the bats?" They're 20% of mammals. You're never going to be able to do that, and it would have an impact on the ecosystem. It would screw things up because they are important parts of the ecosystem.
Yeah, if we go exterminate all the bats.
But All right. So the solution to that is to be ready with antivirals and vaccines that would
Right.
protect us
Mhm.
against a lot of coronaviruses, which we can do. We could have had, and I think I talked about this last time, we didn't have them. It should have been easy. Piece of cake to have an antiviral when this thing came out of China. It would have been the end of it back in December.
Wow.
But as far as wild animals go, you can even immunize wild animals. Did you know we immunize wild animals for rabies? We take
Yeah.
rabies vaccine, we put it in bait, and we drop it from helicopters into the woods, and it really suppresses rabies circulation in
Mhm.
wild animals. So you can do that as well. There are lots of solutions. It's just a matter of wanting to do it. And the problem is when there's no pandemic, people don't get interested in this stuff anymore. Interest wanes. And then we get stuck when the next one comes along. I'm hoping this will change it, but I'm not sure if that'll happen.
Well, I think it will. For some amount of time, interest is going to be pretty strong. There's going to be some inertia. But can you characterize? I'm sure. Wow, this is a hard question. What can you say? You're worried about crossover of a new mutation. Do you want to handicap that in any way? Like, obviously, you think it could happen. Do you think it's likely, or
When viruses go to a new host, they change. It's a brand new environment, right? So we saw in Denmark, the viruses that went into mink, they changed, and it affected their ability to be blocked by human antibodies, right? Fortunately, that lineage seems to have gone away, so it's not a threat, but that could happen again, or it could happen somewhere else. And I don't know how likely it is. It's theoretically possible. We should just be ready for it. We should have good biosecurity on all farms so that infected people don't go in and take care of animals. That's crazy. Everyone should be tested routinely. They should be vaccinated. There should be enough biosecurity so that you do not infect your animals and have them infect you. That can be done. We know on pig farms, for example, very high biosecurity in many countries. You can't go visit a pig farm. They're inside and they can't have contact with people.
Interesting.
And you can make vaccines, as I said.
Yeah.
If you want to keep your mink industry, just make a vaccine. It's not hard to do. You could make an mRNA vaccine if you wanted to, right?
So, Vincent, you talked a little about being unprepared and funding.
Right.
Has the pandemic, at least for the short term, changed the more general disease and research investment level? In other words, all of the countries of the world have been punched in the gut by lockdowns and trillions of dollars of expense.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen, as a virologist, any change in investment more broad than just COVID?
Well, this can happen at two levels. This can happen in the private sector and in government, right? So the NIH has got a $2 billion infusion of cash earlier this year for COVID-related stuff. The bulk of that is going for clinical trials, right? They're paying for a lot of it. They're very expensive. Very little is filtering down to basic research, like finding antivirals to block the next generation of coronaviruses from bats.
What wasn't there a specific stimulus from the U.S. government to
Yeah,
fund?
it's what I'm talking about. It was like $2 billion or something.
No, but
like
I'm
that.
talking about. I believe it was an $800 million research grant, only for them to figure out how to fix 400 million or 800 million. Big difference. Is that?
It's not a lot of money, but I don't see a broad effect of it. I mean, we wrote a COVID proposal and got a great score, and they said, we don't know if we can give you the money because we got to make sure the clinical trials get done first, right? So that's my experience. It's not
That's annoying.
a windfall. It's not a windfall. You know, the NIH budget is $37 billion, and that has to go for all health-related stuff, not just infectious diseases, right? And so it's not a lot of money. And if we had more, we could be better prepared.
So
for
after
this
all of this, they're still not approving your research grants to try to figure out better solutions for this.
They don't have enough money. They don't have enough money. And then the private sector, you know, the problem is a company won't make an antiviral if there's no virus around, right? But that could change. We now have a couple of nonprofits. There are two of them. One is called CEPI, C-E-P-I, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Initiative. And the other is READDI, R-E-A-D-D-I, which they're both nonprofits. They raise money, and CEPI makes vaccines and READDI makes antivirals for viruses that companies will not touch and get them maybe to a phase 1 where they could be ready for rapid deployment during an outbreak. And maybe that's the model we need going forward, because, you know, companies are based on profit, and you can't make a profit on a virus that's not here yet. And that's the problem.
Wow, man. So even though we've lost trillions of dollars, as a result of a global economic collapse,
Yep.
you're still not confident that we're gonna
No.
yeah, that from a research perspective we're gonna improve.
And fraction of that, a fraction of those trillions, we could have prevented this pandemic. Less than $1 billion. We did a paper last week on an antiviral that beautifully inhibits SARS-CoV-2 transmission in ferrets, right?
Mm-hmm.
This antiviral has been around for 5 years. It was just never developed because nobody wanted to invest in it. It affects a lot of RNA viruses. It could have been ready to go in China. I'm telling you, if we had this antiviral, you could treat the initial patients. You would have stopped the spread of this virus.
Oh my God.
And so
Wouldn't take
contained
much.
it like SARS-1 or something else.
Would have been over. Would have been
That's
over.
so frustrating. So this entire pandemic is a result of underfunding research. We already had the solutions.
Yep. Everybody should be really pissed.
Well,
okay? I'm trying to
am.
get more and more.
I'm very mad.
Devin, you like my book recommendations. You like the book Decisive. Very quickly, those same authors have a book called Upstream.
Yeah.
And it's all about how hard it is to get funding for prevention versus treatment. Not just in medicine, but in so many places.
That sucks so bad because I pay so much in taxes to one of the most advanced countries in the world, and we just don't solve these problems that we can solve. It'd be one thing if it was like, wow, it's theoretical, but it was like, if we have an antiviral that could just put a stop to the thing, where was the World Health Organization? Where was the
so you
NIH?
and I can
Where was the
you and I can do another show on this because I'm with you. The problem is, if you prevent a pandemic, like nothing happened, and it's hard to show. Like no one, if Vincent and his peers had this thing and we had given it to a few people in China, it would have been a one-day news story, and you'd have never. You can't prove I prevented a $1 trillion or many $1 trillion global pandemic. Because they're like, oh, it probably wasn't that bad anyway. It probably just would have been those 7 people in the Wuhan market. That's the mental fallacy.
Now we had it. Now we had the $1 trillion pandemic.
And
so
still not
going
better.
forward,
we have the example now.
Yeah.
But that's.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Yeah, I hope we get a little smarter.
Look how unconfident he sounds in his faith in humanity. That's why he's got pictures of viruses back there and not the pictures of humans. Because he's lost faith in humanity. I do it to a certain extent. I have, you know. I was joking, but you're serious.
No, science could have taken care of this. I'm totally convinced, and many of my colleagues are. Many of my coronavirus colleagues are. This could have been prevented. We've done multiple podcasts on this, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite clear this could have been prevented with the right investment, and just simply doing wildlife surveys in China and other countries where there are bats that have coronaviruses in them. You can't get funded to do that. And that's what you need to get these viruses and say, what do we need to inhibit them? It's totally doable, folks. You should be outraged. All of you should be outraged that your lives have been screwed up because of a lack of foresight.
Yeah.
Well, you are on the right site for outrage. Twitch has many talents, and one of them is outrage. So you're tapping into the right vein here.
It feels like so outraged at whom exactly? Because is it governments that should do this? Is this some kind of organization, like a World Health Organization?
So,
is it like what?
It is.
Yeah.
So I can't. I mean, you have to be outraged at the pharmaceutical companies because they didn't invest, but that's not their model, right? It's really not their thing to do. So really the NIH should have supported this, but they don't have enough of a budget, and this is risky.
It's
work.
Yeah.
So
politicians have to fund science rather than other things they fund.
And the science funding has gotten very politicized in the last 20 years, and you can't do things unless you're curing a disease nowadays. And if there's no disease to cure, it's very hard to get support. I want to make an antiviral for a virus that might be here in 10 years. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But I hope that it changes. I just don't have a lot of faith. Okay. And it's just frustrating as hell that we didn't have to go through any of this, man.
Vincent, I'm worried you're going to create the super virus, man. If you're losing faith in
Oh, no,
humanity.
I don't do that, but just try and motivate people.
You can still believe there's good people out there. Don't give up, okay?
Vincent
Actually,
doesn't.
there are good people out there. I don't mean to say everyone.
Don't become a
is.
mad
In fact,
scientist.
you know,
He
the
does.
bad ones give humanity a bad name, but most of us are okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Vincent doesn't do a very good job of looking like a mad scientist, which does mean that if he chooses to invent Skippy the super virus and turn it loose, no one will suspect him.
Yeah, we're literally talking to one of the most dangerous people on Earth.
Oh, I have many ideas for making cool viruses. I wouldn't do any of them, frankly.
mean?
I have worked on viruses for over 40 years. I know my way around viruses, and I've done things that can enable. I mean, the ability to manipulate viruses is actually resulting from my work 30 years ago. So I know how to do this, but I would never do that. As I said, I want to help people and make them healthy and teach them. So.
Cool. You know, I really like you as a person, and I always have. And if and you know, just keep that in mind if you ever do decide to destroy humanity.
No, I would never do that. Never.
Please, Devin is asking that you please encode special resistance for all
For
people
him.
with the surname Nash, as long as you can design.
I would never, ever harm
No, I know.
other people.
We're just messing around.
Absolutely not.
You're a good dude.
I just want to help people.
What do you think of the Oxford vaccine? A lot of people are asking about it.
So we should have talked about some of the other vaccines. The Oxford is a totally different kind of vaccine. It is using a different virus to carry the gene for the spike protein, right? It's an adenovirus, which are big DNA viruses. And this one, it happens to be an adenovirus from a chimpanzee. And the reason they use that is because humans are not going to be infected with it. So they won't have immunity, right? Because you don't want to inject this into people and have your immune system not shut it down before it can make spike mRNA. So the problem with that is that they screwed up in some of the first doses in some of the people and gave them only a half a dose, right? It was a formulation problem. And it turned out it worked better when they gave half of a first dose followed by a full booster. And my interpretation is that when you give half of a first dose, you don't make as strong an immune response against the vector because they're using the same adenovirus for the prime and the boost. And you get then on the boost, you get a nice response against the spike. The better strategy would be to use two different adenoviruses, right? And for each one, as we were saying earlier, use a different virus for the prime and the boost. That they're not doing that. So I think that's problematic. I'm not sure what the final recommendation is going to be, half dose and a full dose or full. The full only gave 70 or 60 some percent protection or 70% protection. Now that was the average. So it was 60 some percent. The Russian vaccine is a 2 adenovirus vaccine. The first one is different from the second one. And that makes a lot of sense to me because when you want to use a vector that is a different virus to deliver your gene, I think you should make them different in the prime boost or else only require one shot in all. So I think the Oxford vaccine will be okay in the long run once they figure out the dose. Right? And there are a couple of other vaccines that are following that are similar to that one.
That was my follow-up question is, do you see any vaccines that could be more promising than our mRNA vaccine at the moment?
No, I think that this one is great. And adenovirus could be good, but I don't think it's going to be better than the mRNA vaccine. Then there's another category of vaccines that are being developed, and there are a couple here in the U.S. that are just pure protein, right? You make the protein in the lab, you purify it, and then you inject it into people. And we don't have efficacy data on those yet. Apparently, there's a company in India that's making 1 billion doses of that.
Why?
Because a lot of people.
No, but why make 1 billion doses if you don't understand the efficacy yet?
They're taking a risk.
Okay, good answer.
They're taking a risk.
Also a spooky answer, but okay.
I don't like the protein-based vaccines. I've seen some data which suggests that they don't give as good memory as these other vaccines. So right now, I'm really high on the mRNA vaccines. I'm sure the adenovirus vaccines can be good too, but we just don't have the data yet.
So, Vincent, the gentleman who introduced us, Simon from Singapore, is on, and he's asking about the Imperial College vaccine. Are you familiar with that?
That sounds like some Warhammer vaccine or so. Yeah, like that's awesome. I want
What
that
is
one.
the platform? What is the platform of the? Let me see if I can. Okay, here it is.
The Emperor's vaccine.
Yeah, you want to know if it's mRNA or if you want to know whether it's. He says it's.
Well, I know the Imperial College is involved in testing the Oxford vaccine. I don't know that they have one of their own.
Okay, well, he's listening. So as soon as it loops through and he hears your comment, he'll reply back. We give him the chance because for everyone who's watching, I was lucky enough to be introduced by one of my channel regulars who's here in chat, Ligerbox, who introduced Devin and I to Dr. Racaniello and allowed us to get all this great information. So since we're winding up and we've asked most of our questions and Devin's yawning big,
No, I have more.
he calls this
Robin
Shattuck's vaccine.
I have more.
Oh, Chattox. It's the same as the Oxford vaccine.
It's the Oxford vaccine. Okay. So that's the one you just spoke about. Great.
Yeah. So they're doing some of the clinical trials for the Oxford vaccine at ICRF, Imperial College. Yeah. Same vaccine. So we have a bunch of adenovirus vaccines coming up. We have protein vaccines. In China, they have an inactivated virus vaccine where they grow a lot of it. They inactivated it like the polio vaccine by Jonas Salk, and that's being used there. And there's some infectious vaccines that are being developed, but those are further down the pipe. What we're going to see in the U.S. are mRNA vaccines, adenovirus vaccines, and pure protein vaccines. That's going to be our palette, our smorgasbord of COVID-19 vaccines in the U.S.
So we're going to have a huge, the timing is uncertain, but your point is, the great thing is the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are just shots 1 and 2 at the target. We have, and they seem to be great, but we have so many more producers coming online.
And we need that because we need, hundreds of millions of doses from each company. And then we can cover not just the U.S., but many other countries, because remember, not every country can make its own vaccine. We have to help them out.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Devin, I don't know if you have more you want to ask. I'll just say, Vincent, literally my wife has found a Rite Aid nearby where we can go get an MMR booster after we finish talking. You fully endorse that. You think that's a fine idea.
It's totally safe and there's no downside and it can only help. Yeah, do that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I do have more questions.
Yeah, go ahead. We have kept Vincent 2.5 hours.
These are pretty rapid fire. Yeah. One quick question is, how long will it take for the shot to be effective after getting it? So if I receive the vaccine, at what point would I be protected against COVID beyond? Like, at what point would I be up to the efficacy? Yeah. Okay.
7 to 14 days.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's after the second booster shot.
That's right.
Okay. Second question, in the original talks we did, there was some evidence that sunlight and heat affect COVID negatively. They kill COVID. And now we are using UV rays and filters on subway systems and showing that we can dramatically reduce COVID. Any commentary on that?
Yeah, so we had a guy on who talked about far UVC light, right, which is really inactivates the virus, and it's not harmful to humans for short periods of time. So you can disinfect areas like subway stations and so forth, subway cars. You can turn it on at night. So that's being deployed more widely. And filters, HEPA filters are being used as well in many institutions. We've learned that air circulation is better. If I learned today in your car, if you have a couple of people, keep the windows open. That really makes a current of air that'll prevent the virus from sitting around inside the car. So quite interesting. Yeah. So we're learning about all these mitigations, right?
So you just said that better airflow reduces viral transmission pretty reliably.
Yeah, because if the air is static, then your breath is going to hang around near you for a while. And if other people are near you, they're going to inhale it. Whereas if you have good circulating air, it's going to move it away from you and other people quickly. And that's why airplanes are pretty safe now, because they have top to bottom air circulation, not lateral. right?
Oh.
So it doesn't spread throughout the cabin and it's filtered on top
Are
of
you
that.
fairly confident flying at this point if you wear a heavy duty mask and
It's a good question. I'm getting
Yeah.
on a plane in a few days, so
Rip.
I'd love to know.
I think if you wear a mask. So the Department of Defense did a study in August where they put dummies on planes and they made aerosols and did all sorts of experiments with virus. And they said the top to down circulation in a plane makes it a very safe place to be as long as you're wearing a mask. So I think you can fly, wear a mask the whole time. And, you know, I'm convinced by that. The filtration and the airflow is really helped there.
what about the airports before getting on a plane?
Yeah, that's dicey, right?
Yeah.
Because there
Mhm.
you have a lot of people milling around, and so
And less airflow,
spend,
particularly.
spend less time in the airport, right?
Yeah. So if you're actually on the plane itself, it's well controlled, but airports
Yeah, the
are
plane
very-
itself is very safe, apparently. Yeah, according to this DoD study. Now I haven't seen it, but I've read summaries of it.
That's really
Looks
interesting.
pretty good.
And what about sunlight and heat? Any updates on that?
So there's no question that sunlight and high humidity decrease transmission.
Mhm.
The sunlight inactivates the virus. The high humidity makes the droplets that you expel fall to the ground quicker. And, you know, for a brief time, we had lower transmission in the early summer until everyone started partying and so forth. And likewise, in the winter, we get more transmission because it's colder and less humid, and the drops remain suspended longer. And so that's in part why we're seeing this huge jump in the fall, which will continue through the early months of next year.
Okay. My final question is kind of like a closing question. I don't know, Ethan. If
I'm
like,
good.
Okay.
We've kept Vincent generously with his
Yeah.
time. I love it. You know, give him a break. It's East Coast and getting late. So yeah, have at it.
Okay. I think that question would be, what lessons have we learned from this pandemic? What are you confident in going forward? I know we've kind of heard the sort of less optimistic side of it. But
So,
have we learned something? Yeah.
we've made vaccines quickly. We've learned that. We have learned that many of the antivirals that we tried to repurpose, the already licensed for other things, didn't work. We have learned you cannot give a patient an antiviral when they're already in the hospital. When you're sick, when you can't breathe and you go to the hospital, by then you don't have a virus problem anymore. You have an immune response problem. And giving people antivirals and even monoclonal antibodies at that point is useless. Now, the problem is that most of the ones we have, so there's remdesivir, a drug, and monoclonal antibodies by Lilly and Regeneron. They have to be given intravenously. And so that's why they were given to patients in the hospital, but it doesn't work there. So now we have learned to test at-risk people, and as soon as they're positive, send them to an infusion center where they can get infusions of monoclonal antibodies.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned that distancing and masking in these interventions do work to cut down transmission. But I think the biggest thing is that we can make a vaccine that prevents it, and that's really important.
Excellent answer.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for your generous use of time. We got to reach tens of thousands of people over the course of the last 2 hours. Both, I assume Devin, but I'm sure I will both get this edited and out on YouTube.
Our videos will reach tens of thousands or more. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where it'll reach tons more people. We'll do that right away. And so as soon as I go get my MMR booster, I will get to work on getting this up on YouTube. And you offered to come back further in the pandemic. We'd love to have you back in a few months when there's more data and when the vaccine becomes accessible more to people who have the choice to use it or not, as opposed to right now, you know, it's people who really need it. And I would assume their workplaces are going to require them to take it.
Yeah.
So,
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be my pleasure to come back. Sure.
Excellent. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wish you a good night. This has been Dr. Vincent Racaniello from Columbia University in New York. He's been our guest several times, and he's so knowledgeable. It's amazing. So.
Vincent, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on YouTube. My nickname is PROFVRR, or on microbe.tv. You'll find all my podcasts. That's my own website, microbe.tv. And This Week in Virology is the name of the podcast. Check it out. You'll like it. If you liked what you heard tonight, you'll really enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
You've
guys.
done an
Take care.
amazing
Stay
service.
safe. All right.
All right.
We'll try.
Good night.